Right, I am back with another build, and today we actually have a build request. This one comes from a long-time member of the community, and someone who I would actually consider a buddy of mine, Sin, or Sinless. He, a very long time ago, and I apologise it's taken me so long to get to this, asked me to do a sort of stage magician build, someone who specialises in misdirection and sleight of hand, obviously with the actual spellcasting that exists in Baldur's Gate, but for the longest time I didn't do it. I thought, in a tabletop, you can reflavor any spell or action kind of however you want, but in Baldur's Gate 3 it's a bit hard to do these kind of more specialised concepts, because obviously this game has preset animations and everything's kind of determined. So how exactly do I go about creating a character that specialises in misdirection and, you know, stage magicianry in a game like this? And then I thought, I'm thinking about it the complete wrong way. The whole point of this character is that and a character in general in role-playing games is that they're supposed to have an arc. So I'm thinking, why not make a character that starts off just doing simple parlour tricks that are immediately outshined by anyone who actually has an ounce of magic, and then actually learns magic throughout the campaign and is able to take those ideas of misdirection, influencing people, being a big showman, and turn it into like actual ability as a character. And I've also decided to use some older concepts that I've come up with before to kind of augment this build, and you'll see what I mean kind of as we get into it. But without further ado, let's get into the build. We're going to be kicking things off as a rogue today. Rogue is going to give us a bunch of things, namely, we're going to be getting weapon proficiencies that I want for this build, namely simple weapons, hand crossbows, longswords, rapiers, which is going to be our main focus, and short swords. But we can make use of all of these proficiencies, so we're quite happy to have them. We'd also gain light armor proficiency, but I am using clothing for this build. And but the main thing we're going to be getting out of this is the abilities, the skill proficiencies. We also do get sneak attack, which we will be able to use with this build, which is quite nice, but otherwise we are going to be working, we mainly just kind of want the weapon proficiencies here. Otherwise I may have started with a different class, but we want those weapon proficiencies. So here we go. Strength is at 8, we don't need it. Dexterity is at 16 because it is going to be our main attacking stat. Constitution is at 14. Again, I would kind of like this higher, and you will have the option to put this higher if you decide to go for a slightly different option that I'll be showcasing later, but for now it's at 14. Intelligence is at 8, we don't need it. Wisdom is at 10, we don't really need it, and I had some extra points, and I feel like Wisdom is better than Intelligence for a lot of saving throws. And Charisma at 17, because yes, we are going to be using Ethel's Boon in this build to kind of help round out our stats. I'm power building a little bit with this one, because I found a way to kind of make this build stat-wise quite satisfying, as well as just overall having a decent chunk of power. And I feel like this character is a bit of a sleazeball as well, kind of using his panache and all this to kind of like, you know, live a life of, debauchery. And as such, especially when trying to learn actual magic, I feel like he would definitely take some shortcuts, let's just say. And in fact, I actually feel like getting Ethel's Boon will directly tie into this character's magical origin, and you'll see what I mean but as we go. But let's go for skill proficiencies here. The game has got a pretty decent selection here already, and I've gone with the I believe it is the charlatan background for deception and sleight of hand. Literally perfect. We've got acrobatics here, because again, I feel like a character like this who is able to move about the stage quite briskly and like do all these different like kind of acrobatic tricks to help deceive and misdirect would absolutely do that. He'd be moving all across the stage, so having acrobatics is great. It also gives us resistance to being shoved, which is nice. Stealth I've gone with as well for proficiency. I mean, it just kind of makes sense that like maybe when you disappear off stage, you want to be able to make sure you can move stealthily, like under the floorboards or whatever. Sleight of hand we're taking expertise in, because of course we are. I mean, Mike's explanation of this build's kind of concept should have given that away. Deception I've also gone for expertise in, also makes sense, and I'm also taking proficiency in performance and persuasion. I feel like this build rounds out really, really nicely. We get all those skills at level 1 that are perfect for roleplay. Brilliant. Next up, at Rogue level 2, we're going to be able to hide, dash, and disengage as a bonus action. All of these are going to be super useful for this build, again, and it feels right on par for a Stage Magician. Moving quickly, moving without being noticed, and hiding. And disengage is actually going to have a very unique kind of interaction on this build, which will make perfect sense when we get into it, so I'm quite happy to show that off later. Looking forward to showing that off later, but I'm happy about it too. And finally, at level 3 of Rogue, yes, I know, I wanted to take Arcane Trickster too. An Arcane Trickster would be a lovely option for this build, giving you the Mage Hand Ledger Domain to do all sorts of funky things, getting Mage Hand right off the bat, a couple of cantrips, couple of spells that all make sense. I know. But we're going Thief. Again, I'm kind of power building today. And Thief is going to do something awesome for us, because yes, this is a variant of my left-handed spell sword build. Oddly enough, I never actually really showcased Bard in that video, and that was a mistake, because I feel like Bard can actually create pretty much one of the stronger left-handed spell swords in the game. And you'll see why when we get into it. So yes, and I feel like, again, with this character who spends a lot of time, you know, finally crafting their act, you know, how their hands and arms move, I feel like they would be quite dexterous enough, I can't speak today, to wield a very finesse weapon. In our case, a rapier, which is what I'm going to be focusing on here, but things like short swords, scimitars, daggers will all work. But I see him as kind of like a rapier guy. I mean, that's just me. It can be whatever you like, though. And now, we're actually going to be moving away from Thief. I only want 3 levels of it. Now, we are going to be delaying a few things like our first feat and blah 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 blah, but it'll make sense when we get into it. And besides, we're going to be using things like Ethel's Boon. Our charisma's already going to be at 18, and we're also going to be using some equipment to bump up our stats even more that we get in the early game. So you're not going to feel those lost ability score improvements early on at all. In fact, you're going to have stats that are kind of ahead of the curve for that point in the game, and you'll see what I mean when we get to it. But we are going to be taking our first multi-class dip into Sorcerer. And let me explain why. Sorcerer is going to give us a few things, and I think for this character, around the time that they'd get Ethel's Boon, so think about it, you've just defeated Auntie Ethel with your party, and she's like, no, wait, oh, Petal, I can give you a, why is she from the south? Oh, Petal, I can give you... I'm losing my mind. This is how you can tell I'm genuinely passionate about a build, because I'm stumbling over my words and losing my mind. Anyways, rubbish Auntie Ethel impression aside, she's basically, I think her giving this guy her boon and also her hair would actually trigger latent magical abilities that this guy has. And as such, now we can use Sorcerer magic, but of course, it's unstable and wild. I want a 1-level dip of Wild Magic Sorcerer with this build to give us Wild Magic Surges, because if you don't know, all you have to do is take a 1-level dip into Wild Magic Sorcerer, and all your spellcasting across all of your classes now has a chance to trigger a Wild Magic Surge. So, I feel like because this guy kind of cheated his way into magical ability, in a way, I think it would be unstable, and he's going to have to learn to master it, and as such, Wild Magic Surges would occur. See? It's cool when I actually put Ethel's Boon into the build lore-wise, too. As well as Tides of Chaos as well, giving us advantage on our next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, but with an increased chance of a Wild Magic Surge afterwards. And something I forgot to point out at the start of this build, I've gone with Zariel Tiefling for this build, and that's not just a cosmetic choice. Going with Zariel Tiefling at level 1 is going to give us Thaumaturgy, which I think a guy like this would absolutely have. You know how Stage Magicians, they have the microphones that play into the speakers? Thaumaturgy is just a magical version of that, allowing us to project our voice in a loud way. That's what Thaumaturgy is. And Thaumaturgy also gives us advantage on performance and intimidation checks, mostly performance. So I think Thaumaturgy is perfect for this build, and just getting it for free with our racial choice makes perfect sense. And also, I wanted to build a Tiefling today, and I think I've done a really good job. This whole outfit and the hair and everything and the beard is all vanilla. The only thing that is modded is the facial structure, but obviously you can mostly recreate this build vanilla. The colours and the outfit are all vanilla, which is nice. Anyway, tangent over. We're going to get a few cantrips at this level. Of course, I want Friends to give us advantage on charisma-based checks. kind of making Thaumaturgy worthless, but again, I mainly wanted Thaumaturgy for the flavour, and in fact, since you have Thaumaturgy, if you just want the performance checks, you can get rid of this entirely. But Thaumaturgy does still have a use if you're making performance and intimidation checks, because friends can make the person you cast them on hostile in Tactician and Honor mode, but Thaumaturgy won't, so it does still have its uses, so I would definitely pick up both. Mage Hand, absolutely. Again, it's conjuring a spectral hand to help with our magic tricks is perfect. Minor Illusion, again, complete misdirection. And Dancing Lights for a bit of stage lighting. You know, we're getting everything in this build. We're getting lighting for the stage, we're getting misdirection, we're getting this. We even got the microphone. Like, come on, you can't say this build isn't amazing. We also get to level 1 spells, and of course I'm going to be picking up the pretty standard options here. We need Mage Armour because this is a clothing build, so I want to be able to bump up our armor class that way, as well as Shield because it is one of the best defensive spells in the game, and I would not miss picking it up. And of course our subclass, once again, is Wild Magic. And now with that one level dip out of the way, we are jumping over to Bard. So now that we have awakened to our magical ability, it is now kind of merged with our already existing showmanship to give us bardic powers, which we didn't originally have. So, being a bard, we're going to get a few things. As a racial option, we're also going to get Legacy of Avernus Branding Smite, so I guess we can hit with radiant damage now. But mainly we're going to be getting some cantrips. Of course we're taking Vicious Mockery, again being able to cast Vicious Mockery as an action, making creatures have disadvantage on their attack rolls, getting a ranged attack to deal psychic damage, and then being able to make 2 attacks with our bonus action after that. That's what the left-handed spellsword's all about, baby. And a magician throwing out taunts as he dances and pirouettes around his opponents, smacking them with a rapier, stabbing them. Oh, perfect. Absolutely perfect. I love the visual of this. This is actually a character that I would play in tabletop if the mechanics worked the same way, but unfortunately Wild Magic only works on Sorcerer spells. Ah, such a shame. I would personally rule, if I was the DM in that campaign and somebody wanted to play that character, I would personally rule that it works with all spells. But anyways, we can pick up another cantrip as well, and I'm actually just going to go with True Strike, because believe it or not, it actually works on this build, because we can cast True Strike as an action, gaining advantage on our next attack roll, then our offhand attack can be a sneak attack because we have advantage. Yes, it takes our concentration, but it's True Strike. We know it sucks, but hey, it actually has a use on this build, so I'm going to take it. We're also going to be able to pick up some level 1 spells. I want Heroism. To give us 5 temporary hit points every turn and prevent us from being frightened. This helps us overcome our stage fright and our anxiety. Fairy Fire, again, another big light show that can serve as either misdirection or just lighting for your stage. Tasha's Hideous Laughter, again, it's nice whenever you crack a good joke or maybe a good insult that your targets fall over with laughter. That's how you know you've made it as a showman. And then finally, I would say, well, let's get a proper offensive option here. Let's get Dissonant. Whispers are giving us a way to deal psychic damage and possibly frighten our opponents. It's like, is this your card? Whoa, how did you do that? And then they, like, freak out. I'm sorry, I'm having a lot of fun with this build today. As we also get our instrument as well, and of course I'm going with a lute. This guy's playing a lute. This guy would absolutely be the guitarist in the band. 100%. And we're also going to get an extra skill proficiency here, and it can be whatever you like. I would say at this point having a little bit of Arcana proficiency would kind of make sense as we're starting to get into that magic stuff, but you can take whatever you like. Intimidation would round out the kind of all of our dialogue skills, so we have access to all of them, so I'm going to pick that up. At Bard level DOS, we are going to get a few things. Jack of all trades to add half of our proficiency bonus, round it down, to any ability checks we are not proficient in. Perfect. As well as Song of Rest giving us a 3rd short rest. Brilliant. We also do get an extra level 1 spell, and it's entirely up to you what you want to pick here, it really doesn't matter, but I'm going to grab Featherfall, because I would think this guy would have an extremely showy entrance for his stage show, by actually, like, basically, like, say he's on this outside stage here, right? And the curtains open, it's like, he's not here, where is he? And then he jumps off a nearby building, gently floating down onto the stage as he, like, spreads his arms, casts, like, dancing lights on the floor to bring the lights up and all that, and thaumaturgy to, like, have his voice boom across the air as he floats down. Come on, this build is so fun. I know we can't do half this shit in Baldur's Gate, but it is still really cool. Right, as for our subclass, again, we're doing a little bit of power building, and I really wanted to dive into that kind of finesse-y kind of character, almost like a kind of swashbuckler vibe, Pirates of the Caribbean style combat. So we're going with Swordsbard, because Swordsbard is going to give us everything we need to really make this left-handed spellsword build come to life, namely the fighting style to weapon fighting, allowing us to, whenever we make an attack with an offhand weapon, which in this case is basically our main weapon, we can add our ability modifier to the damage of those attacks. We're getting this a little bit late. I mean, you're still going to be able to do lots of damage with your offhand weapon before you get this, but this is just going to add even more for you. So overall, I think this works out quite nicely. We do also get access to level 2 spells at this point, and it's entirely up to you what you want to take, but again, if you're building this build and you actually want to play it correctly, take like the typical, like actual useful options, but I'm grabbing Knock, because I can see this guy having a trick where, like, okay, you're going to lock me in the box, and then we're going to throw that box into this pool of water, and it's covered in padlocks, and I will escape somehow, escape death, and then he uses Knock to get all the locks off, and then maybe Misty steps out of the box back onto the stage, like, ta-da! You know, stuff like that. So Knock makes perfect sense for this build for those old, you know, magician lock-picking tricks. And we also do get 2 expertise at this level. And I'm going to say performance and persuasion are pretty much perfect. So, yeah, well done, game. You picked the good ones by default. Oh yeah, Swordsbard also gets the Blade Flourishes, you know, the one that boosts your AC, the one that lets you knock an enemy away and then teleport to them, and the one that lets you attack multiple enemies at once. Totally forgot to mention that. I will also say, though, that this build does kind of conflict with itself a little bit, as the Blade Flourishes can only be used on your main hand weapon, but our main weapon is our offhand weapon. So, depending on what you dual wield with this build, you kind of have to play around with it, but when you see the equipment that I'm using at the end, you'll be like, ah, yeah, that's fine, that's fine. So, at level 4 of Bard, total level 8, we're getting our first feat, which I know feels kind of bad. But with our ability score... Now, this is where you kind of have a choice. You can either take an ability score improvement. At this point in the build, with the equipment that you will have 18 charisma and 18 dexterity. So you're not going to be bad off for skills, because I'm using the chest piece armor that gives you +2 to your dex. So your stats aren't too bad. So if you wanted to bump up your dexterity here to make it a 20, you could. You could bump up your charisma, your constitution even, to 16 if you want. I wouldn't bump up your charisma because we are going to be using the birthright hat as well to bump this up to 20. I'm just going to kind of go over that now. So at the end of the day, you are going to have a lot of kind of good... Your stats are going to be fine. So if you're just using light weapons and you don't need the dual wielder feat, then maybe bump up your constitution or your dexterity. However, I want to use a rapier with this build, so we are going to be taking dual wielder. This allows us to dual wield weapons that aren't light, using 2 weapon fighting with them, and we also gain a +1 bonus to our armor class while we have melee weapons in each hand, so we're getting a nice defensive buff out of this as well. As for our cantrips, we do get another one here. Light, it's more stage lighting. We also can grab another level 2 spell at this level, and it's entirely up to you what you want to pick. At this point, it really doesn't matter. I picked up Detect Thoughts for the flavor, because again, imagine you're doing a card trick, and it's just like, oh, I bet I know what card, you know, you're thinking of. Is it this one? And they're like, oh my god, how did you do that? And it's like, because I read your mind. So, Detect Thoughts is how we're going to get that. But of course, you could take things like Heat Metal, Enthrall. Enthrall could make it so the crowd is forced to look at you. That could also work, very nice flavor-wise. It's entirely up to you. Choose whatever you like, but I'm just going with the stuff that I think is quite fun. At Bard level 5, we're going to get a bump to our Bardic Inspiration, making it a D8 instead of a D6, making our Bardic Inspiration more powerful, like giving us like a higher chance, giving our allies a higher chance to succeed their skill checks, but also it's going to augment the power of our Blade Flourishes, because Blade Flourishes are tied to Bardic Inspiration die, so then now our Blade Flourishes will do an extra D8 of damage instead of a D6. We also gain Font of Inspiration, meaning that same Bardic Inspiration will now recover on a long and a short rest instead of just a long rest. We also get access to level 3 spells at this point, and I want Glyph of Warding. Now, this is more of a combat-orientated spell, but it does also work with the theme of misdirection with this build. We're on one side of the stage, our Glyph of Warding is on the other. So when, you know, we set off the, like, kind of, like, special effects using the Glyph of Warding, you know, it and we can do it kind of like asynchronously with our actions instead of having to actively cast the spell in front of everyone. It's more misdirection, it's more like showmanship, it's more special effects. I quite like it, but Glyph of Warding comes with a ton of really cool kind of effects. There's the detonation one, which blows people back. There's elemental damage, and there's also the ability to put people to sleep as well. So it gives us a lot of nice tricksy ways of dealing with opponents. At level 6, we're going to get a bunch of extra stuff as well. We're up to level 4 spell slots at this point because of how we've multiclassed. We're also getting Counter Charm as well, and Counter Charm summons a music box which plays the like main theme of the game. So now we've also got music for our performance. So we've got music, lighting, special effects, microphone. We've got everything we need to do our stage performance. So yeah, Counter Charm is great, and we're also getting extra attack at this level, meaning now we can make 2 attacks with our action and 2 attacks with our bonus action. We are now a full dual-wielding build, full martial fighter, and again, once you see kind of some of the other stuff I have for this build, you'll see how we can interchange main action and bonus action pretty much however we like. Also, we do get another spell at this point, and there's another bit of kind of stage magicianry that I didn't consider when I was initially making this build, but then thought, actually, it's perfect. I'm talking about hypnotism. There are types of stage magicians or psychics or whoever who will go and hypnotize people on stage and do these other like tricks and all that. So getting hypnotic pattern to hypnotize enemies makes perfect sense. Use this on your enemies or use it on your person that you've pulled up from the audience, your temporary assistant. At level 7, we're going to get access to more level 4 spell slots as well as level 4 spells. And of course, I want to pick up Greater Invisibility. Greater Invisibility is going to allow us to turn invisible but still be able to attack as long as we succeed stealth checks. So if you really wanted to lean into this more and maybe not take some of the flavor stuff, you could make sure you get stealth expertise with this build, which you absolutely could. And then you can go... And then you can literally do the magician thing of, and now watch as I disappear, and then turns invisible, and then you're able to absolutely wreck your foes while being invisible and gaining advantage on every attack, which means sneak attack goes off a lot more as well. So, perfect. We absolutely want this for this build. And at this point, I'd probably replace a lower level spell that you're not using so much, so something perhaps like Knock or Detect Thoughts in this case, just as an example, and I want to pick up Polymorph, because come on, turning someone into a sheep is like one of the funniest things you could do on stage. It would get a few laughs and all that. And of course, with the actual stage magician flavoring, it's like, you know, there's like a puff of smoke, and then, you know, the assistant goes underground, and then the sheep comes up. And in actuality, for us, we're straight up turning someone into a sheep for temporary. I can't speak because I'm too excited. Temporarily. So, you know, Polymorph, perfect for this build. And next up at our final level, we are going to get another spell, and I want Dimension Door, kind of an upgraded version of Misty Step, teleporting ourselves and one adjacent ally, so again, puff of smoke, and we disappear. Perfect. And we also do get our final feat of the build, and I'm going to use this to bump up our dexterity to an 18 for a total of 20 with our equipment. And that is the build. That what you're going to be getting out of this is a ton of flavour, a ton of fun, and a ton of really fun ways to manipulate the battlefield, deal big damage. You got the sword flourishes, you've got things like Glyph of Warding, Vicious Mockery, Tasha's Hideous Laughter. You're going to be great at battlefield control, but you're also going to be great outside of combat. We are a high charisma character with pretty much proficiency or expertise in every single roleplay skill that we could want. We have things like Knock to get in and out of situations, Friends, Thaumaturgy. We have so many different tools to kind of do fun little things throughout the game, and I think you guys are really, really going to enjoy using this build. So, let's get into the equipment now. Oh, let me just adjust the camera. There we go. So, our equipment is as follows, and I'll get into my weapons of choice first. So, in our main hand, whenever I do these left-handed spell sword builds, I like to go for a dagger in the main hand, just because, again, our main focus is the offhand, so I kind of like to make it look like we're only holding one weapon when we're obviously holding two. But for my final kind of main hand option, I've gone for the Rhapsody. dagger. After doing my Astarion build last week, and I'll admit this build is kind of similar to that build in some ways, but obviously being a dual-wielding build, but I feel like obviously the build concepts are very different. But with Rhapsody, this is an Act 3 weapon which, whenever you kill a target, you gain a +1 bonus to your attack rolls, damage, and spell save DC for every foe that you slay, up to a maximum of 3. So this is going to make both our main hand and offhand weapons, as well as all of our spells, especially the ones with saving throws, which are a lot of ours, like Hypnotic Pattern and all that, Dissonant Whispers, we are going to get a lot out of this. And as such, you can also spend these kind of charges, I guess, on different abilities as well. So, like the ability to heal yourself, guarantee your next attack's a critical hit, etc. But yeah, you'll also, this is normally just a +1 weapon, but I do suggest that, and this is what I've done here, you have a sorcerer in the party that can twin cast the Draconic Elemental Weapon buff from the Drakethroat Glaive. Pretty standard strategy, you've seen it before on the channel, to give both your main hand and offhand weapon an extra +1. Basically just going to make this build a bit more powerful overall. But yeah, Rhapsody in the main hand works perfectly, but of course that's an Act 3 option, so here is an Act 1 option for you. The Knife of the Undermountain King. Pretty standard choice. Reduces your critical hit threshold by 1, meaning that you roll it on a 19 or higher. And then whenever you roll a 2 or less on your damage die, you can re-roll the dice, taking the highest result. Which is great. I mean, slap this in the main hand, and then anything in our main hand and our offhand are going to be getting this buff. The other buff we have here is Shadow Blade, which is supposed to give us advantage on attack rolls against slightly or heavily obscured targets, but according to the Baldur's Gate 3 wiki, this is bugged at the moment and doesn't seem to work, which sucks. But again, as an Act 1 option, this will absolutely work out for you. And for our offhand, our main weapon, we have the Harmonic Dueler. This is a +1 rapier that you can pick up in Act 3, but it comes with a unique ability, Mellow Harmony. You make a performance check, which we have expertise in, success granting all of your melee weapon attacks additional damage equal to your charisma modifier, with a minimum of 1. So, once per short rest, so basically once per combat, for 10 turns we give all of our melee weapon attacks an insane damage boost, basically Pact of the Blade Warlock. In addition, since we have 20 charisma and 20 dexterity with this build, that's a lot of damage. Again, it's normally only a +1 weapon, but with the Drakethroat Glaive buff that I've added here, we are a +2, making us a lot more powerful. So, and again, I feel like a little, and I think it does have like a slight hum to it as well whenever you do it, like there's a sound effect that plays. So again, it's just more showmanship, more effects, more sounds. I love it. I think it's perfect for this build. But again, this can only be obtained in Act 3, so an Act 1 option would be the Rupturing Blade. It's just a pretty standard +1 rapier that will work out nicely for us, but it does come with a unique attack called Searing Blood, dealing an additional 4 fire damage, flat, as well as dealing extra piercing damage and extra fire damage, but we do take a little bit of slashing damage ourselves. So, and I feel like it kind of fits with the fact that we're a tiefling, so you can pick this up in Act 1 and it'll work out pretty nicely for you. And yeah, those are the weapons. I haven't included ranged weapons in this build, but if you wanted to, you could pick up dual crossbows, which would work really nicely with this build, or the Darkfire Shortbow to give yourself haste, but I wanted to focus on other concentration spells for this build, and I feel like if we are doing ranged attacks, I'd much rather we do Vicious Mockery instead of a crossbow attacks. I feel like that's more on theme with the build. So, while it's up to you if you want to use ranged weapons on this build, I'm personally not going to do so. I will quickly, just noticing our AC is 16 here, that's without Mage Armour. 1 second. There we go, let's turn around. Yeah, I want to fix the camera because it was a good shot. There we go. We now have a 19 AC, which is pretty respectable. Right, let's get on to the equipment. As already mentioned, we have the Birthright Hat to give us a +2 to our Charisma. This is obtained in Act 3, so if you want an Act 1 option, you can pick up the Cap of Curing. So whenever you inspire an ally with your Bardic Inspiration, they also regain a d6 of hit points. Next up is the Cloak of Cunning Broom, allowing us to, whenever we disengage, create a foggy cloud with a 2-meter radius around us that lasts for 1 turn. Literally, puff of smoke and we disappear. I couldn't not include it on this build, especially when we have the ability to do this with one of our 2 bonus actions. Perfect. Absolutely perfect for this build. The Graceful Cloth is our chest piece of choice. This is obtained in Act 1. We gain Cat's Grace, giving us advantage on our dexterity checks. We increase our dexterity score by 2 to a maximum of 20, rounding out our dexterity for us and giving us an 18 very early on as well as we gain a +1 to our dex saving throws and also increase our jump distance, making us even more nimble, which is perfect for that, you know, opening act of floating down with Featherfall. Brilliant, absolutely awesome for this build, had to pick it up. Next up, we have the Arachnia Bracers, allowing us to cast Mage Hand with one of our 2 bonus actions, gives us a buff to our strength saving throws, but also lets us cast Telekinesis, allowing us to throw a creature or object with our mind. Once per turn, we can continue to use this again while concentrating. We can cast the spell every short rest, but of course those subsequent uses, as long as we keep up our concentration, will keep going for 10 turns. This allows us to throw objects or enemies around again for our stage show, being able to like juggle things telekinetically with our mind, or like be able to juggle like huge objects like elephants or something, just as an example. Like, again, it all adds to the showmanship and I absolutely love it. But this option comes out around the end of Act 2. And if you don't really care about picking up Telekinesis and you want an early game option as well, then the Bracers of Defense will do quite nicely, giving you a +2 bonus to your armor class while you're not wearing armor or holding a shield. We are doing neither of those things, so we're always going to be getting a buff as if we're holding a shield, and in addition to dual wielding, that's a +3 all around, giving us a grand total of 21 AC, which is quite nice. But I love the application and the flavour of the Arachnia Bracers too much, but it's entirely up to you. And finally, we do have the Disintegrating Nightwalkers here, allowing us to be unable to be enwebbed, entangled or ensnared, and we cannot slip on grease or ice. Our footwork is so impeccable that nothing can stop us once we get moving, as well as giving us a usage of Misty Step once per short rest. That was the only thing I was kind of lamenting with my class choice here, is that we don't get Misty Step naturally, but with these boots we do get to use it once per short rest. In addition to combining this with our first accessory, the Amulet of Misty Step, giving us another usage once per short rest, we're getting 2 Misty Steps per short rest, which is more than enough for any combat encounter, allowing us to zip around, disappear in a puff of smoke again. Honestly, I couldn't not get Misty Step for this build, and with these 2 items here and the other buffs that the boots provide, it just felt perfect. I couldn't not include them here. And finally, our ring combination, which is probably pretty obvious because they're the best rings for a build like this. First up is the Ring of Arcane Synergy. Whenever we deal damage with a cantrip, we gain Arcane Synergy for 2 turns. Arcane Synergy adds our spell casting modifier, that being our charisma, to the damage of our weapon attacks. I mean, of course, we're going to use this Vicious Mockery, and then all of our main hand and offhand attacks gain a massive bonus. In addition to Harmonic Dueler, we're just going to be extremely strong when we attack. Perfect for this build. As well as the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. After hitting a creature with a weapon attack, either our offhand or our main hand, again, we are kind of interchanging actions and bonus actions pretty freely here. We can now cast illusion or enchantment spells as a bonus action. So now we basically have free control over what we do with our action and our bonus action. We can now cast Vicious Mockery and other illusion and enchantment spells with our bonus action or our action. We can basically interchange and do whatever we want now. It's pretty cool. You'll see in combat like just how versatile this build is. You're basically able to just do whatever you want whenever you want. It feels awesome to use. And yeah, that's everything. You will see in the combat footage that is currently showcasing, this build is pretty strong. Unfortunately, the encounter itself was a bit tough overall, because obviously I wanted to test against Chuckles the Clown, so I could have the stage free for my my showcase here. So I decided to test against him, but unfortunately, like, the things being added into the fight, if it was just Chuckles the dog and like the other like absolutists, it'd be fine. But the dinosaur and the God, what's it called? Why am I forgetting what this is called? I made a whole video on it. Displacer Beast. They kind of made the fight a bit too tricky to do solo, especially when we're not exactly the tankiest build in the world. We still only have 86 HP at the end of the day. But, so I brought in a little bit of help in the form of Minthara, who from my own personal playthrough was a Warlock Paladin, which was a fun build, as well as Gale, who was also a wild magic sorcerer, so that was kind of fun. The only thing I realized only after kind of finishing the recording was that I had the non-lethal damage passive toggled on, so we actually didn't get the Rhapsody bonus throughout the fight, meaning that technically what you're seeing with the build now is not the full power. If we started racking up those kills, Rhapsody would have made us even stronger, so this build is powerful. It's probably one of the stronger builds I mean, the left-handed spell sword on its own is a pretty powerful concept, but with the amount of battlefield control that we're getting here, in addition to being able to do massive melee damage, like, it's crazy. I would definitely say make sure you have that Drake for a Glaive buff, though, as it is going to be quite a significant difference, so make sure that you've got that ready. But otherwise, I really, really like this build. The flavoring, the kind of overall design, like, I absolutely love it. The camp clothing, specifically that I'm using for this build, you just kind of have to find it randomly throughout, like, containers, so anywhere that you would think there would be clothes in the game, kind of just look for it, but just any camp clothing will work. You can pick your preference there. But yeah, what else can I say? This build is probably one of my favorites I've done in a while. I feel bad that I left it off for so long, but once how to make the concept work finally clicked in my head, I had to do it, and I'm honestly so proud of how this turned out. This is one of my favourite builds I've ever done on the channel, and of course, it's a Swords Bard again, but what can I say? Swords Bard is just brilliant, and Bard is my favourite class in this game. There's no questioning it at all. It is just my favourite. But yeah, as for end of video stuff here, I'm recording this on the Saturday morning, which then I'll be doing a live stream in less than an hour, so that's fun. I say Saturday morning, it's actually Saturday afternoon. Whoops. So I will be live streaming soon, so hopefully that went well. And the overall reception to the Yondala deity build, which was cooking grandma, was very positive, and I was really happy and passionate about that build as well, if you couldn't tell from that video. So it's nice that I'm kind of feel like I'm getting my creative drive back when it comes to Baldur's Gate builds, because obviously, burnout and all that, but like these past two builds I've really, really enjoyed. So I'm kind of happy to be like kind of getting a second wind as far as that's concerned. But yeah, there's not really much else for me to say. Like I say, I've got to get ready for stream in a minute, so I think I will leave this off here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.